Hey everyone, welcome back to our series Ottoman Lives, looking at the cast of characters that make up the Ottoman Empire. We're going to look now at the eunuch. This is one of the most exotic subjects in the Ottoman Empire. It's like something out of Arabian Nights, out of a fairy tale set in the Middle East. And eunuchs, interestingly, were at the center of the Ottoman government. Some of them held significant political power. But despite being at key centers of power for over 3 centuries, eunuchs remain something of a mystery. They always seem to be background players and sources. They don't get biographical attention like sultans do. There aren't long descriptions of them or accounts of their early lives. So they're hard to track down, and they're always mentioned in passing, as if they're the furniture of the imperial palace, even though they're the ones making key decisions when it comes to the harem, when it comes to how administration is done, when it comes to how palace court life is conducted. And the palace was the nerve center of the Ottoman Empire throughout its classical age. They were key power players, even though we don't know that much about their backgrounds. But when we read about eunuchs, it seems like we're reading about a bizarrely different world that was really at the heart of Istanbul until about 100 years ago. Well, let's go back to where eunuchs are in court life in the Middle East before the Ottoman Empire. The use of eunuchs was not just restricted to the Ottoman Empire or Islamic civilizations. Some people think that using eunuchs in the imperial household was something that the Ottomans adopted from the Byzantines after they conquered Constantinople in 1453. And the seclusion of women in the harem was something that mirrored the Byzantine practice of separate women's apartments. But really, eunuchs show up in the great Islamic empires, beginning at least with the Abbasids in 750 AD. East African eunuchs seem to have been particularly popular as harem guardians for reasons that remain unclear, but probably because that was the easiest country to obtain them from. And what I mean by that is that there were ancient slave markets in that part of Africa, so it was simply easier to get slaves there. We see tropes of African harem eunuchs in the 1001 Nights tales, many of which depict life at the Abbasid court in Baghdad. So the role of eunuchs in Islamic states and the Ottoman Empire was this. The ruler maintained eunuchs or castrated males who were brought in as slaves to guard and serve the female members of the royal household. And as we're going to see in this series with the concubine, women were always kept in separate quarters in the imperial palace and sometimes at wealthy households, so this is why eunuchs are important. But eunuchs had to be obtained from Africa for this reason. Islam had forbidden self-castration by Muslims or castration of one Muslim by another. So eunuchs were bought in slave markets of Egypt, the Balkans, and southern Caucasus, where there was a Christian population. This is sort of kind of a moral laundering, where even though in their own religion castration was forbidden, they simply bought castrated slaves who were castrated by someone else. So they were actually creating the market for this practice because eunuchs could fetch a high price on the slave market. They were incentivizing people to do castration, even though they themselves did not do it. So this is a kind of moral laundering going on. In the palace, there were 2 categories of eunuchs, the black eunuch and white eunuch. Black eunuchs were Africans or African origin, mostly from Sudan, Ethiopia, and the East African coastal region. They were sent to the Ottoman court by the governor of Egypt. They served the female members of the royal family who resided in the Sultan's harem. The white eunuchs were mostly white men imported from the Balkans and the Caucasus and served the recruits at the palace school. The black eunuchs underwent a more radical form of castration, whereas in the case of the white eunuchs, only their testicles were removed, neither of which were a walk in the park. But the most important figure in the eunuch power structure was the chief black eunuch, who served as the Kızlar Ağası, or the chief of women, also considered the chief of the harem. He was in charge of the harem and a large group of eunuchs who worked under his direct supervision. So the chief black eunuch enjoyed close proximity to the Sultan and his family. He would be known well by women who would later become queen mothers and give birth to future sultans. And there were periods, especially in the 1600s and 1700s, when women practically ran the empire through weak husbands, weak sons, and eunuchs were critical in this power politics.